highway systems, mass media, cement, fresh running water, sewers, government with separation of powers. We think of these as hallmarks of our most advanced industrial civilizations. But in fact, they're little more than relics of a lost time, rejuvenated by our own modern nations. The civilization to which I refer is, of course, Roma, the Roman Empire. Rome crafted immense roadways to move troops and trade, invented the Julian calendar, which we still use today, brought fresh running water into cities with aqueducts, and removed waste with sewers, and even perfected the art of politics within a senatorial legislature. And so the question I have for you today is a simple one that you probably answered sometime on a 4th grade elementary test. How long did Rome last? When did Rome fall? Well, the answer you probably gave in 4th grade was 500 years, from 27 BC to 476 AD, when barbarians finally sacked the capital. Or you may have included the days of the Republic beforehand, going all the way back to 509 BC, giving us 1,000 years, a full millennium. Maybe you even threw in the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantines, all the way to 1453, giving us 2,000 years of Rome on earth. But the fact of the matter is that what Rome created was not destroyed at any of these points in time. In fact, the only thing that perished even temporarily was the Roman Republican imperial system. And while the nations of today may no longer fight with a gladius or wear togas, every nation of 2015 has, in some profound way, felt Rome's vast and enduring influence. But I find it almost impossible to think of this in the abstract, so let's put it on the map. Let's start by tracing out the political influence of Rome throughout the ages. So first we have Rome, 117 AD, the peak of the imperium. All the territories from Iberia in the west to the Middle East, Britannia in the north down to Africa, and everything in between. As we move on in time, we pick up with all the children of Rome, those nations that spawned either directly out of the territorial lineage of the old empire, or having chosen to adopt Roman values with titles such as Kaiser and Tsar. These are the great empires, Britain, France, Spain, Russia, who did not sit idly by in Europe, but inherited their forefathers' expansionist ideology, expanding out across the seas, conquering new lands, and further disseminating the influence of a culture long thought perished. In rapid succession, we have the anachronous empires of the French in North America, Africa, Southeast Asia, the Spanish in the Americas, the Caribbean, the Pacific, the Portuguese through Brazil and South Africa, the Dutch in Indonesia, New Amsterdam, and elsewhere, the Germans and Austrians holding Central Europe, the Ottomans in the Balkans, the Middle East, Africa, the Russians in Eurasia and Alaska, and finally, of course, the British with their global network of colonies. And when you put all of these maps together, what you get is something that looks a little bit like this. It's pretty, isn't it? So, for our purposes, let's overlay the modern borders of these nations so that we can see which nations of today have felt this political Roman influence. But, as I mentioned before, Rome's influence far transcends this basic political control. Rome's government was a pioneer of its age. The system is a system that still functions all over the world today. Rome's government had 2 consuls whose duty it was to execute the laws of the land and serve as the public faces of Rome during diplomatic negotiations. Alongside them was a Senate, a legislative body tasked with enacting the policies of Rome, and a series of magistrates whose duty it was to uphold laws and serve as judges. Now, this should look very familiar to all of you, as this is essentially the same system under which the American and countless other nations' governments operate today. Rome, too, had an executive, legislative, and judicial branch of government. And while they may have used different names, such as consuls or later emperor, the system functions in essentially the same manner, separating powers between different branches of government. So let's return to that modern border map for a moment. If we add to this all the countries of today that function under a Roman-style government, we can throw in the Scandinavian nations, Iceland, Mongolia, Japan, South Korea. But we can also add in countries like Afghanistan, which, although may not function under an entirely democratic system, still use the Roman paradigm of an executive and legislative branch, separating powers between these two bodies. Now, as I'm sure you're thinking, given that there's only one blank spot left on the map, how on earth is this guy going to connect Rome to North Korea 2015? I admit that question caused me a lot of frustration in writing this talk, but then it hit me. Remember the list of innovations I mentioned at the beginning? The sewers, the concrete, the highways, the calendar? Yes, even North Korea can be linked back to Rome via these cultural inheritances. And so we can see that through combined political and cultural influence, the entire world of 2015 has been in some profound way influenced by Rome, a nation that has supposedly been deceased for thousands of years. No timeline can be placed on the beginning and end of Rome's influence. Rome has become truly immortal, immune to time. So where does that leave us? Well, if Rome's influence achieved immortality with nothing but the meager lands of the Mediterranean, what does that translate to for us today? Certainly, if you consider everywhere that the US military has been deployed in the 21st century, the land vastly outstretches Rome's puny influence. By that logic, everything that the US or any nation does today, now, will continue influencing, affecting, and guiding people, places, and events for millennia after all of these borders have long since faded. And so perhaps the real question Rome poses is not how long the Roman legacy may have lasted, but rather how long our legacy will last. And more importantly, what kind of legacy that will be. Gratias vobis ago, and thank you.